Justin, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, baby? How you feeling?
Man, good. We were laughing all off air. I was comparing your Charlotte Hornets, old school Charlotte Hornets hat to my Carolina Panthers, and a little bit of that shared misery at this point. But I tell all my Cowboy fans we've been to the Super Bowl a couple times since you have. So I'll take the last 25 years, even if currently it's a little bit of a struggle. I'm excited to have you today. We've got a lot of mutual friends in common. Obviously, in the speaking industry, you've got a number of books out, and so there's a lot of stuff where we're crossing over audiences and people, and you're really approaching meaningful work and creating meaningful work in a very different way than what I see out there. And I know your newest book is I Respectfully Disagree, How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. And so let's kind of, before we get there, let's talk a little bit about you in terms of why the ability to have difficult conversations matters to you. Is there something kind of in your past growing up that maybe you struggled with it, or you saw it do it differently than anything else that you were like, I want to learn more about that?
Yeah, man. I love that, by the way, Jake. Two different stories, right, that kind of converge to bring me where I am. One is my mom, right? Like, my mom was one of the dopest people ever. She would take us to events, and we grew up, we didn't have a lot of money, Jake. And so we would, when we went to Salvation Army, to get our clothes before it became cool, she would go get like sweater vests and bow ties, because I swear she was trying to create a Boys to Men group. But the interesting thing is, throughout all the economic challenges, my mom still made sure that we experienced difference. And we even went to events that we disagreed with. And I remember sitting there in the audience like, Mom, why are we here? We don't even agree with this, right? But what she was doing is she was planting these seeds that there's humanity on the other side, right? And so one of the things that I always took from that, my mom being one of the first black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force, she would share that sometimes she'd be stationed in Japan for 2 years, and there's some soldiers in that same 2-year time frame that never left base. And she's like, Justin, I don't want you and your brother to be like that, to never leave your metaphorical home base and not get to experience the beauty of people and cultures around you. And so that, for me, became really this passion pointer around as I got older. Those seeds were planted about engaging with people in very respectful and honoring ways. Now, on the other side, my dad. Now, my parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and initially I would see my dad every other weekend, and it became 1 weekend a month, and then, Jake, I didn't talk to or hear from my dad at many stretches for 2 or 3 years at times. And when I was younger, it didn't bother me because I just wanted to go skating and learn how to skate backwards with the ladies and all that kind of stuff. But as I got older, it impacted me in a deeper way, because I remember I was living in Mississippi at the time, and I'd pull off on the side of the road and literally just start weeping, like almost uncontrollably. And so in 2019, I was going to go confront him, right? Will Smith style. Not talking about the Chris Rock version, but the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air version.
Yeah, I knew where you were going, Fresh Prince. Yeah, I was with you.
Right, and like, for those who haven't seen the episode, oh my gosh, like, Why Didn't You Love Me, right? Which was an unscripted moment when his dad came back into his life. But because I have a really good therapist, that I still have, and a great leadership Charlotte cohort that I was a part of at the time, they challenged me from, instead of going to confront my dad, to going and hearing his story. What a later participant told me, she was like, Justin, they helped you turn a confrontation into a conversation. And as I went to go hear my dad's story, I learned so much that I didn't know. And through respectful disagreement, I ended up embracing my heritage that I had been holding back all these years, because he represented that. He's from Ghana. My mom's from America. That makes me African American. You'll get that joke tomorrow. But the interesting thing is that those two different aspects of my life, both from the positive perspective and a challenging perspective, brought me to where I am today.
I love that. And one of the things I want to talk about that really stood out, ton of things that we're going to get to today in terms of the impact work you're doing. I definitely want to talk about one of the climbs you did. But when you talk about, this idea of difficult conversations. Yeah. And my brain went two places. Like, when we first connected, right? Your book is Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. So you're immediately, your brain's going, okay, politically, religious, racially, like, we come from different places. Elephant in the room in some places. We just don't talk in a lot of places, especially more so like with social and politics. It feels like, hey, how do we go at war each other? But you also talk heavily within meaningful work environments and culture. And sometimes difficult conversations are, I got to hold you accountable.
Yes.
And there's very much, people would never probably say the two of those are together, right? How do I talk to somebody I completely disagree with politically?
Yeah.
And how do I talk to somebody I have to hold accountable and I'm really uncomfortable? But the emotional side, I would imagine that you work with, it's the same type of discomfortable feeling regardless of that. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, it's very accurate. And I'll even take it a step further. And a lot of the focus around inclusion and things like that, that was rightfully placed. I think that some people got scared to hold accountable people who were different than them. And so many of my clients, they were like, well, I don't want to really hold accountable that woman because I don't want to be perceived as mansplaining or seen as misogynist or a person that may be a different race or culture or a different identity because I don't want it to feel like I am othering them. But that's not holding accountable like that. That's actually hurting them, and it's hurting you as a leader. And so I've seen it on the opposite front as well, is that people didn't hold accountable because of the discomfort of the difference. And so one of the things that I think is really important, whether you're having a difficult conversation on the side of it's a divided world or it's just difficult, is this conversation around relational capital. How are we as leaders hearing the stories of those that we lead? How are we engaging in what we call our pillar one, which is challenging our perspective? And so we don't just talk about, oh, this is a great theory. It's like, how do you do it? So one thing we've been challenging leaders all across the world, Jake, is to cancel the open door policy. Many of us, we created the open door policy behind closed doors. We even have people on a virtual, like I'll be on Microsoft Teams from Tuesday through Thursday, 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right? And we do that, but we've been challenging leaders to do what we call, to move from an open door policy to what we call an out the door policy, where we go out to hear the stories, experiences, journeys of people. What brought you into our industry? What brought you here? What brought you to our company? What brought you to our country? Whatever that thing may be. But how do we do it? I'll give you one mathematical formula. It's called 1 MC over W, what we created because we wanted to help people to strategically do this. And 1 MC over W simply stands for one meaningful connection per week. What if you built into your calendar 15 to 20 minutes to have a meaningful conversation, to ask questions, to hear people's stories, and if that's too much, flip the W upside down, make it one meaningful connection per month, and maybe it's a lunch time moment. But those are the ways that we can lean into better having these difficult conversations when we've built up enough emotional capital that it's not the only time we're having a conversation because it's difficult, but because we've chosen to.
So I love that. And you and I are very kindred spirits in that regard. One of the things we talked about in my book, Lead Better Now, is the importance of that, right? And I used an example of one of my former coaching clients who did a 50 cups of coffee. So every day it was 10 to 15 minutes when he joined the team. No work. I don't want to hear about work. I don't want work problems. Like, tell me about you. Yeah. And he would log it so you can ask those questions to make those deposits in it. And I always laugh because the diversity of thought and opinion politically, religiously with like some of my best friends, you don't see as often if you just spend all your time in an echo chamber online. Yeah. Right. My best friend and I we'll talk debates and politics and issues all day long. And there's some things we will never agree on. But if I were to say anybody's like my brother, like he is my brother, like best friend for life, right? And so it's funny when our third buddy, who probably leans more like him, is moderating stuff. He's like, actually, that's a point for Jake on that one. And my friend's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, so like we have, but to your point, like it's all relational. But I'm curious from your perspective, if you turn on the news, if you go on X or if you go on Facebook or you go on anywhere, I feel like more in the last 4 to 5 years, people are just like, I'm cutting you out if we disagree. Like, period. I don't want to have a conversation with you. Are you seeing that same thing? And if you are, how are your clients and workplaces responding to that? Because that tension and hostility is not helping productivity. It's not helping us get on the same page. It's not like we got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles about to play for the Super Bowl as we're recording this. And there's people in those locker rooms that disagree politically, religiously, like different lifestyles. But yeah, they found a way to come together for a common goal to try to win a championship. So how are you seeing in a corporate space them doing it differently or even doing the same thing that those teams are doing? Yeah,
so there's a lot of divergent thought on this. And I tell you the ones who I see are doing it well and those who aren't. Those who are doing it well, one of the things that they are creating is both formal and informal spaces for people to hear other stories. one of the things that we believe to be so true is proximity breeds empathy. The less we hear of people's stories, the less we hear of people that we love, that we work with, that we cherish, that we trust and value, and we're like, oh, like they said that. Wow, let me give it a little bit more credence, because online it's so much easier to other somebody else, to dehumanize them. Of course they would think that. Now we fill in the blanks with what they probably think, what they believe, what their background is, all these things. But for somebody I've been sitting next to on the team meeting and I've been working with them, or whether remotely or in person, and I hear their story and I'm like, wow, I never realized you went through that. I never realized that that was your journey. And so I've seen these moments where, you know, we call them curiosity circles. And so we work with our clients. And one of the things is to help them create these formalized curiosity circles where people are allowed to share their story. It stems from a statement that we often make, is that we should seek to be more interested than interesting. And one of the things that we struggle with is that we want to be so much more interesting than the next person. We're ego tripping, trying to figure out
that ego.
Yeah, right? I'm going to show you up. I'm more interested than you are. Guess how many touchdowns I had when I played college ball, right? What we do is, versus asking, like, oh, what sports did you play growing up? Now you're digging into understanding and learning and asking better questions. So I always say the organizations that are doing it well are creating these spaces, both formally and informally, like Curiosity Circles is a great example. Another example of this, we took the Ford Family Foundation through this, and it's what we call our Circles of Grace. And our Circles of Grace, I created this for myself because, Jake, I was not living up to my mom's ideals. I was confining myself to my circles of comfort, people who look like me, believe like me, thought like me, and I wanted to change that. And so I strategically created this for myself, and now we help other people with this. Is every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I don't know a lot about and or I disagree with. And I go asking 2 questions. What did I learn about this event, experiences, and our people? And what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? And it's been transformative. So like the Ford Family Foundation, we did at the end of the 6 months. Oh my gosh, they talked about so many more things that they learned about the people that they leaned into to learn about and the experiences. And they were like, I didn't know. And you know why we do that? Because we fill in the gaps with conclusions rather than curiosity. And so those are the organizations that are doing it well. The ones who are not doing it well are saying, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about things that are very important to you at work. And they think that that's going to solve it. But all that does is create the spaces where people do it in the break rooms and other places.
Well, I was going to ask, when they do that, it's not. It's like it doesn't go away, but it probably puts it into an environment. I'd say less safeguards or respect, because there's not that establishment up front. And would you say part of that? I know one of the things you talk about is this idea of the dotted line dilemma. Yeah. Part of that is just our natural inclination and what our brains just automatically do. And so talk about that dotted line dilemma that we need to be aware of as leaders so that we can obviously work to overcome it. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a quick question. We're going to do an example. Like, I like experience, right? And so those who are watching and listening to this, I want you to answer quickly. Don't think about it for a moment. Jake, I want you to answer too. All right. All right, Jake, what is the correct side of the road to drive on? Go.
Right.
There we go. Awesome. I did this I was doing a podcast for those in Australia. They're like, left, right? Yeah. And I was like, why? They're like, because it's the safest. Why would anybody else drive on any other road, right? Or side of the road. In our context, our background, our history shapes how we think. Imagine, Jake, you've been living in Jamaica for the last 10 years. Even if you grew up in America, you would probably say left. Or you'd be like, well, it depends. Immediately, right?
Where am I? Yeah.
That's the dotted line dilemma. Is like we end up filling in the gaps with our conclusions rather than with more curiosity. We start filling in the blanks with what we think it will be versus asking more questions. And that's the thing. And to your point, I love that you said this because most people don't get this. It is our brains working against us. Yep. Our brains want to fill in the gaps with things it thinks it doesn't know. And so if it thinks it knows something because it got its second or third hand information, it categorizes it for future use. And so imagine if I saw all these guys that have Carolina Panthers hat on and like 2 guys with Carolina Panthers hat come up and smack me against my head. I'm now looking for all these Carolina Panther guys, like, who will smack me against my head again, right? And that's what we end up doing with people. And so one way to combat that is with more curiosity. How do we get more curiosity? Because I love when people just say, just be more curious. We don't know how to do that. Let me give you the
Just be
habit
more
to
mentally
curious.
tough. Just be grittier. Just be more curious. Just be more grateful. What's the problem? That's what we tell you to do. Just be more of
Just
this.
do it, right?
Yep.
But one way to grow in that 1% more is what we created, we call the power of 3 model. And the power of 3 is where you listen at least into the third level of the conversation. What we found in our research, we found that people normally listen to the power of 1 or the power of 2 because they can't wait to get it back to who? Themselves. And it's because we're trying to form connections. But y'all, I want y'all to be very careful. In our desire to form authentic connections with people, we sometimes end up taking control. So instead of when that person starts talking to you about that new steak restaurant that they've been to, instead of saying, but have you been to this one? What if we ask, oh, what made it one of the top steak restaurants you've been to? Power of 1. It's like, oh man, the way the steak, was it, what kind of size did they have with it? Did it come together? They're like, oh man, that was really good. Was the service good, right? But now I've gone to the third level versus immediately bringing it back to me, and it allows it to have a deeper conversation with someone else.
What I love about that is literally, just the other day, it echoes a Harvard study that talked about like how do we get we communicate for 2 reasons, right? Learn things and get people to like us. And how do you get people to like you? You ask an open-ended question and a follow-up, a good follow-up. Yeah. And to your point on that, right? It's creating that pull to where you're, as you just said earlier, be more interested in others than interesting in yourself. One of the things that keeps resonating in my mind I wanted to ask you about as you were saying all this is there's a huge influx right now of back to office, right? Back in person. Yeah. Everybody who is like, man, I was going to live the rest of my life in PJs is like a huge wake up call right now. You got to be back. But there's still a lot of organizations that are virtual or hybrid. And sometimes this is I feel like it would be a harder way to do, because if we're on Zoom, man, I can just check out. I can have my camera off. I can be in the room. Everybody's talking about things. I don't have to be there versus like I'm in the room and like you can read my face and body language whether I'm in or out. How are you seeing organizations do this virtually or hybrid format as well as the in-person of creating those spaces? How are they doing it effectively from a hybrid for our leaders here who are already, right? They're drawing that line. Well, I can't do that because I don't have everybody in person all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it because one of the things I love about leadership is we can either focus on what we can't do or figure out ways that we can do it. And one of the things that organizations that figured out what they can do, and I'm going to be honest, a lot of organizations are doing this RTO horribly, right? Whether you agree with return to work or not, it's just been horrible because they haven't really shared the why. They've just said, come back to the office. And
or like in the case of what I was about to say, was it North Face or North Face was kind of like, if you don't report back in 3 months, you have to live in one of these cities to go to the office. And if you don't, we'll take your resignation. And I could be wrong that it was North Face, but it was like a major outdoor retailer said that. And to your point, everybody's like, are you just doing this because you want to save money or you weed out the employee staff? Like that's everybody's first thought is their why is you just want to get rid of everybody. And this is the easiest way for you to do it.
100%. And that's what we're seeing. Like, I've talked to some people, had some clients where they started moving to the hybrid because they plan on getting back to the full R2O. And what we realized, it was really about politics. And I'm not talking about politics in terms of our country. I'm talking about they got tax breaks in the city where they built their headquarters. And the leadership of the city was going to them and saying, we need your people back because that is actually why we gave you the tax break of being here. But they're afraid to be honest and open to say that. I think people would be more understanding if they said, hey, this is why we can pay the way we pay. This is why we can provide the discounts or the benefits that we pay because we receive these types of tax breaks. So that aside, one of the things that we've seen, one way that leaders can lean into this is, well, one of the first things is you have to create a culture that will thrive. And what I mean by that is if you're virtual, y'all, create a culture where you have the expectation that people's cameras are on. I have gone and presented virtually for organizations, and I've seen some, there was not a person who didn't have their camera off. Every single person had their camera off.
And that's the worst.
Right? Every single person had a camera off. And I've seen the organizations where every single person had their camera on, and the one person that may not have came on and actually shared why their camera was off. I'm sorry, I'm driving right now. It would be impossible for me to turn my camera on, blah, blah, blah. And so as leaders, we can create the cultures that can work, right? I was doing a recent meeting the other day, and one of the ways, instead of like really downplaying the people who had their cameras off, I intentionally thank those by name who had their cameras on. Hey, Jake, I want to say thank you for having your cameras on. Alyssa, thank you for having your camera on. This helps us to be able to communicate in a different way. And guess what? And it wasn't immediate, but little by little, people started turning their cameras on, right? But we have to create that expectation as leaders, is that your camera should be on, and if not, please tell everyone why your camera is off. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to create those spaces for people to intentionally engage. One of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, I love one of the things he talks about is this positive focus. And it's one unique way that we as leaders can engage in something, but also follow up with it, right? To your 50 cups of coffee. I love that thought process, what your client did. So what Dan Sullivan created was every meeting they have with Strategic Coach, they start off with a positive focus. Every single meeting, all right? And we've adopted the same principle. And so what is that? We talk about since our last meeting, what's been one positive thing that's happened in our life. Now, guess what that just did? I just learned something that I can follow up with someone after the virtual call. I can call them afterwards like, oh man, you spent some time with your grandma. Like, what'd you all do? Those are some of the things that we as leaders, when we create those spaces and do something like a positive focus and pay attention, write it down, put it in our system, whatever our note system for our employees knows that we lead, that we can then follow up with to have those types of conversations where you can engage in the power of three. Last but not least, and I love what Strategic Coach does with this, it's not, sometimes your team is too big to have a positive focus for everybody to share collectively. So when they had 120, 150 people, guess what they did? In their system, they put them in breakout rooms. And so maybe everybody didn't get a chance to share with everybody, but there are 4 or 5 people who shared a positive focus with someone else. And guess what? Physiologically, they start off the meeting in a much more different place, talking about something positive than otherwise would have started. And so that's how we can lean into that, whether we're virtual, hybrid, but it takes us to model the behavior, to create the culture we want with expectation, people have their cameras on, and even when we're in person, to start your meetings with a positive focus, because you can follow up on that later.
Okay, so you've made a great case for anybody listening to this about ways to do it. But inevitably, probably not in our audience, because we've got a lot of go-getters, we've got people with that growth mindset, but inevitably, right? Somebody's first reaction is something outside of their comfort zone is that discomfort. Sounds great, but I don't want them having conversations in my office. HR is not going to sign off on this. It was kind of like I had a keynote the other day and I met the head of HR, and the VP of sales was like, oh, here's the head of HR. I was like, great. Hey, just want you to know I'm opening the talking politics and religion. Is that okay? Does that make you uncomfortable? And like her jaw dropped. And so there's a lot of leaders who are kind of feeling the same way. And I was like, I'm just kidding. Like, I just know HR, like you're worried about these things. There's a leader who's worried about this of like, I've been here before. I don't have these conversations. I don't want to have these conversations. Talk to them. Give me like your 60-second pitch for somebody who's like, I don't buy into it. I don't want to have that in my office. Why should I, right? Why should I bother with it?
Yeah, there's a cost of not having these types of conversations in your office. And this is what we're seeing consistently with the employee engagement scores, is that people, when they feel they have to walk on eggshells, it hampers innovation, it hampers creativity. This is a whole other category that we may not have time to go into, that we dug into, because I initially just want to help people to move from disrespectful disagreement to respectful disagreement. Jake, there's a whole other category called disrespectful agreement, where I might, in your face, say, Jake, that's a great idea, but behind your back, I'm like, that was stupid. Why did Jake say that? And now I've created this place of unhealthy conflict, or I might have grown up in a society, system, culture that told me that children should be seen and not heard. And I bring that into the workplace with me. And so even if I'm asked, I won't be able to share. And so there's a cost that we have of not creating spaces where people can share honestly about how they feel. This is not just about politics and religion. This is about Do I agree with the budget? Do I agree where we're spending our money? Does finance and marketing agree in terms of how we engage? These are the things, and there's a true cost that we're seeing in engagement and creativity and innovation, where people will hold things close to the vest and to not fully be open and to share. Last but not least, this whole conversation around, do I feel like I can be authentic at work? Some people call it psychological safety and all that kind of stuff, but do I feel like I can really fully bring my full self to work and share how I honestly feel? And if I don't, then I'm constantly guarding myself, and guess what? I'm guarding against the people I probably need to collaborate with to create these projects and initiatives.
I would also imagine, based on that, you're also carrying a whole lot of stress to work,
Yes.
knowing that, like, well, I got to be super guarded, right? You're always on your toes. You're always worried about something. You don't want to say the wrong thing. And so it's this constant state of like, don't screw this up. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't do the wrong thing. And so your ability to work well, much less collaborate with others, is probably out the window, because you're always in the back of your brain. It's like having 10 browser tabs open, right? You're like, don't say this, do this, do this. Don't let everybody know who your true self, like, don't say anything, right? That your level of productivity goes down to probably the point of burnout or disengagement, to where then you just start going through the motions because it just becomes a job versus the goal or the mission or whatever we're chasing.
100%.
Is that pretty
that's why
accurate? Okay.
Yeah, you're very accurate. I mean, that's why you hear things like, and I love when people try to act like it doesn't impact them. When you have these fractions in the locker room and all the reporters are asking about it, it has now become a distraction.
Yep. Even if they say no.
Yeah, oh, it's not a distraction. That we're focused. But you see, they're having closed door meetings. They're having because they need to figure out, how do we deal with this so that we're not constantly talking about how this person said this, or I'm not getting the ball enough, or all these kind of things. And that's the same thing that's happening in our workplace locker rooms. It's that we are not creating spaces where people's mental health is able to thrive, and they're able to think about the things that we want them to on the common goal. I can't think about the championship if I'm constantly being asked about this player who just talked about me in a negative way to the public, right?
Yep.
I'm constantly defending, and I'm not thinking about the next play. I'm thinking about, I wonder if they're going to get the ball this time. So that's
or you're thinking about it when you're on the field, right? You're like, are they taking plays off? Are they paying attention to what's going on? Yeah.
I'm not going to block for them like I usually do, right?
That's right.
All the things that come in, yes.
That's it. All right, so as we start to wrap up, one of the things I think I'd love to ask you about is the work that Work Meaningful is doing in Ghana and the U.S. Talk to me about your mission-driven aspect. I know it's close to home, so talk to me about what y'all do, because to date I saw you've given and helped raise over $100,000. So talk to me about what that is and where it's going, why it's so important to you.
Yeah, so remember the disagreement I had with my dad, the respectful disagreement?
Yep.
That was one of the outcomes. That's why I tell people, you have no idea what's on the other side of respectful disagreement. When I chose to forgive my dad, not because he asked me, because I chose, it was my choice, I realized that I was holding back that aspect of my heritage, and what washed over me was such an appreciation and also a challenge to do more and have a deeper impact. And so after that moment, I remember talking to the headmaster and headmistress in the village that my dad grew up in about how I could help. And they were like, we need, clean water, right? Or the first request was dual desk, and so we provided 90 dual desks. Then I asked, how else can we help? And they was like, we need clean water, because they had to walk 2 to 3 miles to get clean water. And I was like, so we built and did a clean water project and put it right there. And then we asked, how else can we help? And they were like, well, some of the kids are studying outside because we don't have enough classrooms, or overcrowded, other things. The conditions are horrible. We need another school building. And I was like, I can't just write a check for that. Right? And so ended up starting a foundation called Work Meaningful Foundation. And we decided one of the ways we didn't want to be like the normal foundation that always had to rely on grants and other things like that. But we made a 5% pledge that 5% of, at a minimum 5% of our profits from Work Meaningful, from book sale, consulting, keynotes, goes towards these educational initiatives in Ghana and the United States. And so to date, we've been able to raise, give, and we're almost done right now with a school, a middle school that'll be able to serve two to 300 middle school students in my dad's home village. And so we tell people what people give to our foundation, 100% of it goes directly to the impact, right? Because guess what? As a company, we pay for all administrative costs, all salaries, all the website stuff, so that what people give goes directly to that. And that's the way that we make our work meaningful. So when I step on stage, even those days I'm tired, Jake, when I'm in that workshop or I'm doing this course online, or I know that there's a deeper level of impact I'm having there. And it's not just who's in front of me, but it's the future that I'm helping that's going forward, even in that moment.
I love it. And for anybody listening that wants to learn more, Justin has the website workmeaningfulfoundation.org. We'll lead you straight there. You can learn more about it. You can donate to support it. That's one way. Obviously, another way to support it is hiring you to speak, or even buying copies of your books. You've got a few books on your website, linked back to Amazon. We've got links here in the show notes as well. We're going to link to that. Justin, before we go, though, I got to ask, for anybody listening that wants to follow, wants to learn more, wants to see some of your journey and some of the content you're sharing around this idea of how do we respectfully disagree? How do we work more meaningful, right, in our lives and our careers? Where's the best social media to connect with you?
The best is LinkedIn, and it's Justin Jones-Fosu. And I have to give a small caveat because you mentioned this earlier. I just got done reading Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. And I'm taking the month of February. My team will still be on it, but I'm taking the month of February off to reassess my relationship with social media, just to see how I'm engaging. And so I love social media. I think it's great. It has some great things. But guess what I'm trying to replace it with? More meaningful conversations with people. A little less scrolling, a little more calling. But the place that I will likely still stay is LinkedIn.
Love it. Dude, good for you. I always it's funny when you said that. I've got Cal's book, haven't read it yet. Slow Productivity is my next up from him. But I always think about when I go online to make a post, because I run mine and then my team runs the Compete brand, John Acuff made a line. He posted it once and it just stuck. And he said something along the lines of, I like scrolling LinkedIn and Instagram and X. I love having a book published. And he was like, I want to do more love and less like. And so he's like, when I start to scroll, I think to myself, am I liking this or loving this? And so that's always stuck with me to help just be intentional with how we use it. And so, man, good for you to do that reset. A lot of people would not take that, right? Because what happens if I'm offline? But you've built the system, right? You've got a team that can help support you in this and allows you to do more meaningful work. So, Justin, man, I appreciate you coming on the show this week. This has been an absolute joy and excited to stay connected with you.